Unless we build it now. It's the future, y'all. It's the there ain't no future unless we build it now. United States, Africa, we salute ya. A new state of mind, I introduce ya. Close your eyes and visualize the rise of a new paradigm. Solar powered skyscrapers.
Welcome to the Africa Must Unite podcast, a podcast dedicated to inspiring African people worldwide to rise up, organize, and struggle for Pan-Africanism, a unified, liberated, socialist Africa, the only permanent solution to the exploitation and oppression of African people, no matter where they happen to be born or happen to live in the world. Now please, welcome the hosts of Africa Must Unite.
Africa's future is now, so get ready.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Africa Must Unite podcast. I am Mama D, and with us we have...
And this is Brother Neil from the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party.
All right, we're in for a good one today because we have our focus is on Mali and what's going on there now and a little bit of the history, and we have an expert with us in Brother Neil. So you're going to sit back and listen to a great podcast today. And as always, we start off with the calendar dates. What's important in the history of African people and other progressive people?
Well, May is actually African Liberation Month. On the 23rd, on the 25th of 1963, the OAU was founded and African Liberation Day was founded. May is also the month for Palestinian Solidarity Day, which is on the 15th of the month. There are some births of some great revolutionaries during this month. Sam Nujoma of SWAPO and the first president of Namibia was born May the 12th, 1938. Malcolm X and Ho Chi Minh share birthday, the 19th of this month. Malcolm was born on the 1925 and Ho Chi Minh in 1890, both on the 19th. Maurice Bishop of Grenada was born the 27th of 1944, and that great revolutionary from Haiti, Toussaint Louverture, was born on the 20th, 1743. We also grew some organizations during this period. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, a progressive union of African workers, was started on the 8th, 1926. The People's Union of the Cameroons, the UPC, launched its armed struggle against the French on the 22nd, 1955, one of the first armed struggles launched in Africa against the imperialists. on May the 24th in 1961, 27 freedom riders were arrested in Mississippi, helping to launch a new stage in the civil rights movement. We had major victories during this month. Ethiopia defeated the Italian fascists on the 5th in 1941, and the Vietnamese defeated the French at Dien Bien Phu on the 7th in 1954. We had some transitions during this month of some great revolutionaries. Queen Mother Moore, who was a Garveyite, a member of the Communist Party and the founder of the Republic of New Africa, made her transition on the May 2nd, 1997. She also raised a whole two generations of revolutionaries. Modibo Keïta, the first president of the country we'll be discussing today, Mali, and a Pan-Africanist, made his transition on the 16th in 1977. Mary McLeod Bethune, an educator, someone who was always proud of her African heritage and who was a fearless opponent of the Klan, made her transition on the 18th, 1955. And Maya Angelou, the great poet and Pan-Africanist, made her transition on the 28th, 2014. So we had some great leaders come forth during this month and had some major victories during this month.
I'm telling you, look at that. Yeah, just wonderful. You know, this week we start talking to our youth in Watoto Uhuru Shule, the Children's Freedom School we conduct, about revolutionary leadership and revolutionary leaders, and the people you mentioned, you know, were staunch revolutionary leaders. And we got to raise our youth up, don't we, Neil, to be just like that.
We have to raise them up.
Raise them up. And, you know, this month, as I mentioned, we are talking and focusing on Mali. And just to say that our 2022 calendar is dedicated to the masses of our people who are suffering throughout the African world. And as we say, and we know from experience, that only Pan-Africanism, a unified socialist Africa, can permanently solve our problems. So in the calendar and all this year on our podcast, we are highlighting states. Some people say countries. We say states because we are eventually unifying, that are on fire. And it's almost everywhere that we're on fire, where our people are suffering. And this month of May, our focus is on Mali. And when we did our calendar, as you know, Neil, for the month of May, we concentrated on Mali, and this is what we wrote in our calendar. And we started with a quotation from Osajifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, that comes from Challenge of the Congo, page Roman numeral 10. So this is his quote, or the quotation. There are likely to be more coups and rebellions in Africa as long as imperialists and neocolonialists are able to exploit our weaknesses. Unless we unite and deal with neocolonialism on a Pan-African basis, they will continue to try to undermine our independence. End of quote. And this one fits this whole Mali controversy or conflict or its fire completely. And I think, you know, as Brother Neil begins to talk about it, you'll see what I mean in terms of how well the quotation explains the happenings in Mali. But also on our calendar, this is what we said. Stemming from the tentacles and adverse effects of neocolonialism, Mali is undeniably on fire. It continues to be a pipeline for countries such as France, Switzerland, United Arab Emirates, and China, although France is the main imperialist exporter in the country. Two of Mali's major exports are gold and cotton. These two goods alone represented close to 90% of Mali's exports in 2020. This Sahel country exports over $3 billion of gold per year, while its people suffer from poor living conditions, low-wage jobs, averaging about $1.25 a day, and a lack of food and water. The presence of French troops in Mali since 2013 have not only made possible its exploitation, but also added to the destabilization of the region, intensifying ethnic divisions. Adding to this problem is the presence of AFRICOM, the U.S. military command in Africa. Meanwhile, the neocolonial government of the interim Prime Minister, Choguel Maïga, appointed in 2021 after the 2020 Mali coup, accuses France of abandoning Mali and so are in talks with the Wagner Group, a Russian private military company. All this bodes more misery for the region unless Africa unites. So this is what was is in our calendar 2022. And I hope you have it. If you don't, I'll send you one, or we'll send you one online. That's no problem. so that you can still see. We still have some months left. But the other thing to mention is that this, things are in flux and changing all the time. So we wrote this in December or before December in 2021. And so conditions throughout Africa are dynamic. I mean, conditions throughout the world are dynamic and changing, in flux. So since we released our calendar 2022 last December, changes have occurred in Mali. And so, in today's podcast, what we'll be doing is talking about some of these changes, updating you on some things, the developments that have been going on, as well as giving a brief history. And to help us with all of this is our expert in residence, our Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party expert, and that's Neil. So,
well, I'm not actually an expert. I wouldn't say that, but I think Mali is extremely important country, both in the region and throughout Africa. Historically, in terms of the long history, when you had the the great empire Mali,
mm-hmm.
and then in our more recent history, during the independence period, when Mali was a major Pan-African force. If you look at the before independence, you had the African Democratic Rally, or the RDA, which encompassed all of the French, all of the countries, all of the areas that the French had colonized, and they were attempting to reach independence as a unit, as a single unit. And they were tied, the RDA was also tied to the, French Communist Party and so forth. So they were pretty radical, but you had an opportunist, Houphouët-Boigny, who came in, collaborated with the French. At the same time, the French were locking up leaders and activists and assassinating them. Houphouët-Boigny led that RDA into this kind of moderate path.
Mm.
Mali, what we now call Mali today, also stayed on the progressive path and the revolutionary path and the Pan-Africanist path, and actually attempted to form a Mali federation with other organizations, but they also kind of backed out.
Even with Senegal, right, Neil?
Yeah, even with Senegal.
Mm-hmm.
With Senegal, they had their federation, and they were thinking they were going to be what was then called Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso,
Mm-hmm.
and some other countries. So, Senegal backed out, and later Mali, after it received this independence under the leadership of Modibo Keita, helped to work together, form the Ghana, Guinea, Mali Union,
Mm-hmm.
which is a union between Ghana, Guinea, and Mali. And each of these three countries, and they were the only countries which did this, put in their constitution that they would be willing to submerge their countries to a larger Pan-African unified country.
So, Neil, from our enemy's perspective, these countries, or the leaders of these countries, had to go, don't you think?
They had to
they
go.
They fall one by one, don't they?
They had to go. Nkrumah in 66, and Keita, I believe, in 68 or so.
Yeah, 68.
And they all go. And what happened in Mali is you had one coup after the other, after the other, after the other. And so that's part of the problem. The other aspect of Mali is that you have a sort of a historical division that has increased, with colonialism and increased after the introduction of French and U.S. troops into the area, there's a traditional, there was a historical kind of division between the North and the South, in that you had different ethnic groups in the North. In the North, you had more your Tuareg and Arab groups. In the South, they were more black African groups, and so you had that traditional kind of thing. Although probably about a third of everybody in the North is black, so you have major Fulani groups in the North and so forth. But those divisions increased, and they were always there, but they increased under colonialism, and they increased even further after the introduction of these troops. And the big introduction of these troops came after 9/11, when the West, led by the United States, began to use 9/11 as a pretext to go in and try to further the neo-colonization of the country, and further that and deepen their tentacles in these countries. It was all a pretext,
and sow these divisions even more, right?
And sow even more division. And for instance, when the French went in and set up its military situation, it would not even allow the Malian military to go up north. They took care of that themselves, and one of the reasons they did it was because there has been a discovery of oil in the north and gas in the north. So they were trying to get a handle on some of that stuff. With all the millions and billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that have been put into place in Mali since 9/11, most of it has gone to militarization, nothing to really help the people in the north, because there's quite a bit of poverty in the north. And so that militarization even furthered the distance between the south and the north. The other thing that happened was that when the U.S. Assassinated
Gaddafi
in Libya and tore Libya up, and Libya is still broken up, the number of the Tuareg had been part of Gaddafi's military. And so now they came back into the country. And as they had come back into the country, there's been quite a bit of proselytization. It's quite a bit of religious work. A lot of stuff has been put in the north by the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and so forth, with their very conservative and reactionary the Salafist teachings, which they do. And they have really, in many ways, because the government down in Bamako, the capital, doesn't have much of a presence in the north. And so they began actually to set up schools and some sorts of some little monies here and there for the people. So they began to sow even more division. And later we began to see the formation of the Al-Qaeda, what they call Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. And that organization has spread, but we have to understand that Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb is not just merely an organization. It's a business, and it's tied to capitalist interests that find their way all the way back to the Gulf, which has been having its, these Gulf states have their eyes on many places in Africa for other wealth. As you said earlier, Mali has lots of gold, and it's not even fully tapped, and cotton, and then there are other bauxite, other stuff that hasn't really fully been tapped. Everybody wants a piece of that wealth, and that's what this is largely about. But one of the the other thing that's going on is that there's a great deal of environmental change.
Yeah,
The
that's
Sahara
a huge.
Desert, huh?
That's a very, very huge problem. In fact, some statement was just made about 18 million people might be suffering from famine in the area of the Sahel area. So
Right.
um, it's a huge impact on the problem, making things even worse, because as you mentioned, all of these different organizations that are in there, it's a count about 10, and you probably have more than that in terms of these different organizations representing different kinds of focuses, but many times are somehow connected to Islam, whether it's the Salafist or different groups that are there. So Islamic Ansar Deen, Movement for Oneness
Yeah.
and Jihad in West Africa, coordination of Azawad movements, which is
Right.
what they call the northern area, isn't it?
Right. The
Um,
Azawad is an attempt. The Azawad, uh, it's largely a Tuareg movement
yeah.
for independence,
Mm-hmm.
or at or at the minimum, some kind of autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, this attempt at developing the Azawad is being subverted in many ways because they have real grievances over historically in terms of poverty and so forth. But now it's being subverted into a movement that's going to benefit some of these other outsiders more than anything else. So that is really a major tendency. Now, in the past, what used to happen is that you had also in the north, you had major groups like the Fulani,
Mm-hmm.
who were more tied to the south, and who actually had militia that helped, that worked along with the south. But there have been some Fulani groups who have become uh, part of the Al Qaeda movement, and that's created problems. And this is all exacerbated by the fact that these groups, that is, those in the north, those tend to be groups which deal with cattle, and they need land for grazing their cattle. And you also have farmers like the Dogon
Mm-hmm.
and the Bambara, and we're now talking about the middle of the area, who are farmers. And now this desert is coming, and there's less land, and so people are now bumping up against each other.
That's right.
Conflict is brewing, and all of this is being hyped by this introduction of nothing but weapons
Mm-hmm.
from the U.S. and France. It's like you pour weapons into a place where people don't have resources to food, and then how you're going to get your food? You're going to kill your neighbor.
It's
And
the
so
same old
this,
problem here. I mean, anywhere around
things,
the world, it's the same old tactic that capitalists in whatever form use. So, you could talk about dumping weapons right here in North
right
America, around the world,
in
right?
our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
They dump weapons where in a place where you can't get a decent education,
Mm.
and you can't get decent health care, and where housing prices are going up they're tripling and doubling and quadrupling, and people are getting kicked out. And so what are you going to do to survive? And somebody say, well, here's a gun, and it's cheap, and you can try to shoot your way out.
Just kill each other.
Kill your neighbor.
That helps the enemy. Just kill each other. Don't look at me. Kill each other.
So this thing is a spiral. One group kills one, then the other group gets armed, and so there's a spiraling kind of out of control. So in the middle of the country, you see, we have about 1 million people, refugees, are leaving that area, and this is happening all over the Sahel. Sahel, some people say, is Arabic for shore. If you look at the Sahara as a ocean, Um, and then this is the shore to the ocean. And many of the groups now, the Tuareg, for instance, were very active in trade and moving stuff across the desert. And during the ancient period, I mean, during the older period, even up until independence and so forth, there were, workable relationships between people, because if you're Muslim and you're going to take the Hajj, you're going to Mecca, you're going to work with these Tuareg, they're going to take you through the desert and so forth. So it's kind of like a sort of symbiotic relationship. But once you get airplanes and stuff like that, that stuff gets wiped out. And so now these desert areas become areas for smuggling. And this is another way that the imperialists hype up this situation. Here the British, largely through their tobacco, British sending this tobacco in, because cigarette smuggling was a big thing, and they're sending more cigarettes in than can meet the market, and that gets over into the smuggling channels. And those smuggling channels, just like here, the old mafia in the United States got started smuggling cigarettes during World War II, and then it moved into heavy drugs, hard drugs. In this one, in the Malian instance, the cigarette smuggling has now given way to cocaine smuggling. So all of that's in there. All that's in the mix.
So Neil, let me ask you a question, just for clarity's sake, and because you've definitely been talking about the enemy's presence in the area, and also, its impact on the people, and all of that, and leaving off with the whole drug smuggling that's going on now. But now, when you talk about the region Sahel, you talking about what, between the Sahara to the north and the Sudan Savannah to the south, or about 13 countries, or how would you describe
you're talking about the Sahara to the north. When we talk about West Africa, kind of to the south, and to the east, you're talking about the Sudan itself, and that part of the world. It hits on to that, and over into so it's bound by that. And you also have sort of Algeria, sort of to the west. It's also it's that area that's in between North Africa, what we typically think of as North Africa, moving into East Africa and West Africa. So it can either be a unifying force to help unify the continent, as these three regions, as these different regions kind of intertwine there, or it can be a thing which disrupts the whole continent.
And right now, you're really talking about disruption. Is it
right?
So, as you describe it, between the Sahara and the coast of West Africa, and would you include northern Senegal, or southern Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Algeria, Niger? How about that?
Chad, Niger,
somebody
all of that.
Mentioned North Nigeria. The north, extreme north of Cameroon, and Central African Republic, Central Chad. I'm just trying to get to these 13 countries that are all being impacted. The Sudan, the extreme north of South Sudan, Eritrea, and the extreme north of Ethiopia. You're talking about at least 13 countries when you talk about the Sahel region, and all of them catching hell. Isn't that right?
That's it. They're all catching hell, and it's going to be an area that the imperialists, the big imperialists, France, United States, and so forth, and the little sub-imperialists, because Turkey is trying to get in the game. United Arab Emirates, the Saudis, and so forth, the Zionists. All of them are trying to get in the game because there's so much there, and they're trying to make this place hell for our people. So they can grab all of that wealth and destroy people. That's where we are. And so even like the organization Al Qaeda in the Maghreb, then they used to talk about setting up something in the north of Mali and so forth. Now they're talking about coming all the way down into Ghana. People are getting kicked, pushed all out of Burkina Faso. They're coming down into Ghana, into Senegal. So they're talking about taking the whole of West Africa.
So Neil, what is the impact on women and youth? Especially since so many of these organizations that I'm looking at seem to be trying to introduce some form of Islam throughout. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not just Islam itself, but it's what we call the Salafist version.
Yeah.
Which is anti African and anti-humanist and everything. You see, it's not Islam itself, and as Nkrumah points out in Consciousness, he said, look, we got Islam is part of the African scene, Christianity is part of the African scene. The key is we have to it has to be based on and in Africa it has to be based on African values. And so this and so you have
actually making room for all of them, because we all come out of one or the other experience. So I'm glad you mentioned, it's a particular form or particular preaching of Islam that is problematic, maybe, especially when you talk about
it's the
women.
teaching of Islam, because the Islam is throughout Mali, throughout the Sahel, Senegal. I mean, you're gonna have it. I mean, in Guinea. I mean, you got it in Chad, Niger, and all these places. And actually, you have a form of Islam which is, in many ways, more humanistic, and these folks can't stomach that, and they want to destroy Islam. Really, what they're talking about is the use of some capitalist, feudalist. They're fusing feudalism, capitalism, and slavery with Islam, because quite a bit of enslavement is also involved here.
So
you have enslavement in the north.
So what's the impact on women and youth, Neil?
Well, the impact first of all on women is just a minimum impact is to try to shut women up and put them somewhere in the background, and but also allied with all of this to fund this stuff is trafficking. There's trafficking in women. There's trafficking in children. There's quite a bit of child of sexualization and this stuff like that. And I'm talking about very young. And so these monies, on the one hand, these folks say they're religious people. On the other hand, they're trafficking folks all around. Some of that trafficking is into Europe, but some of that trafficking is into slave markets in Libya now and all around. So this is really kind of a big issue. And as always in every warlike situation, it's in these modern era anyway, women and children begin to bear the brunt of the actual physical attacks. And as we begin to see this more intercommunal warfare also taking place in the center of the country, you also seeing a lot of that. So that's actually a huge part of the problem, that all of this is moving. If we don't win, we have to win this battle, because if we don't win this battle, we'll be moved back thousands of years.
I was just thinking about, we were reading Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, and we were on the part that deals with our human forces, and one of the things he talks about is the many complex and varying factors that crisscross and interact and in regard to social-economic groups that make things I guess, complicated. I guess that's what he's saying. Complex. Page 75 of Handbook. And that's back in 68 or even earlier when he wrote it. So now when you're looking at these things in terms of socio-economic dynamics in just this area of Sahel, then you say, wow, it is a lot that has to be dealt with. And so my question to you is, do you know of any revolutionary or progressive motion by the people in this whole region?
Well, there's quite a bit of progressive motion by the people, and it's tied to also progressive motion on the part of the youth. Mali, like the rest of Africa, is extremely young. You're talking about half of the country, majority of this country is 15 years and younger, and the youth are taking up the call to say they're the ones calling to get the French out of there, and they're the ones saying they're saying we have to have sovereignty. This is what some people call a second independence movement.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a mass movement, still quite fluid, and there are a lot of tendencies mixed up in this mass movement. So you have organizations that, and this is why I say I'm not an expert, because there are a lot of organizations in there, and that I'm not really totally familiar with, but some of them are organizations which are socialist and Pan-Africanist. Some of them are Pan-Africanists. They say they're Pan-Africanists and so forth. Now, what their ties is with the masses, because many of them were kind of involved in the electoral arena largely. But how they're going to move at this particular period is going to be interesting. There currently is a military government in place,
mm-hmm. and it is like the fourth in just a handful of years. It's the fourth since 2013 or 2014, and so you have one military government after another. Of course, it was an attempted coup. Just this week, wasn't it? That was supposedly foiled, led by army officers supported by what they call an unnamed Western state. And it was said that a small group of anti-progressive Malian officers and non-commissioned officers attempted a coup on the night of May 11th to the 12th, 2022. And they were supported by a Western state, but they don't name what it is. So just this series, I mean, that's why we started that calendar piece for May on Mali with that whole quotation from Nkrumah about one coup after another.
And so each coup generates another situation, and then you have another coup. So the coups so far haven't solved the problem. So it's not the coups, that are going to solve the problem unless you come up with a Sankara type person.
Or these Russian, supposedly these Russian mercenaries in Mali that Mali is leaning on,
The Wagner Group, but I think the Wagner Group is not necessarily going to, given what's happening in Ukraine, the Wagner Group is probably not going to be even full force in Mali. They might be, but they're mostly going to be. They'll probably be mostly down in the capital more than anything else. The current leadership just had talks with Rwanda, and Rwanda is presenting itself as some type of Pan-Africanist power or whatever, and the Congo like crazy.
I think we missed some of what you said. You were saying something about Rwanda, and we actually missed it.
Oh, you didn't hear me? Rwanda, the Malian, the military in Mali just reached out to the Rwandans, to help them in their fight with the North. Rwanda has just been involved with Mozambique, dealing with, I guess, Al Qaeda or ISIL down in that part of the continent, and probably had a little success. So they're coming, there are discussions about them coming to Mali now to do some things. But but that cannot be the answer either, although they're also African, because they have their own interests and their own ties to imperialism, where they work hand in glove with the imperialists, and they carry out in Africa some of the things that the imperialists themselves cannot carry out. And they set up deals, especially in the Congo and in that particular region, destabilization. So
Neil, as we come to an end, so you highlighted all these things that are going on. So the question is, what role can organizations such as ours, revolutionary, Pan-African, and socialist organizations, do today in helping to solve the problems at home or solve the problems of our people?
Well, I think one of the first things we have to do is the question of forming a Pan-African front, what Nkrumah called the AACPC. The All-African Committee for Political Coordination is of utmost importance. And we don't have to call it necessarily AACPC, but we have to bring together those forces who see the unification of Africa with a scientific socialist system as priority. We must come together, and because this is not a problem that can only be dealt with by Mali itself, it has to be dealt with throughout the region and throughout the continent.
And outside the continent. I mean,
and outside the continent.
About Pan-African organizations, the front or coalition can be worldwide. And the good thing about it is you see that kind of motion going on right now. Organizations forming relationships, and that's a great inspiration for us. And of course, what we have to do is what you're doing right now, is political education. Letting us know first what's going on.
And also, this outside is very important, because both the outside in places like the United States where we are, but especially in places like France, where you have so many Africans from the continent, from the Sahel, from Mali, from West Africa in general, and from all over Africa, and to put pressure in these places. Also, we have our people in the middle, in the Gulf, working and living, and we have an African presence in the Gulf that goes back from the very beginning of that area, and they have to be politicized and conscientized and so forth. So that's the first minimal thing we have to do.
Yes,
but we also have to begin to really oppose this AFRICOM business on the continent.
Hands off Africa. And that's the rallying cry too.
Yeah, we have to actively oppose them. We can put the information out. We have to actively impose them on all fronts. We have to actually, and the same thing with inside of in West Africa, where you have ECOWAS putting these sanctions on Mali because the French, Italian, Americans are telling them to do it. It's not going to help the situation. It's going to exacerbate the situation. It's going to make the situation worse. It's going to even impact those countries because so much trade goes through Mali to these other countries. So it's cutting off their own hand to listen to these imperialist
inspired folk,
Yeah. So those are things we have to do, and we have to really get in motion.
Neil, we're having to end, but I mean your whole points about getting into motion and coming together, as a coalition or as a front is a major thing that we have to do, and we're just so thrilled that it's going on, that you see these groups coming together in so many different ways to politically educate and do other things, and that's the way to go. So we just have to come back and have us another conversation about Mali, but for sure what we do know is Mali is not an exception in terms of what's happening throughout our homeland, Africa, because that's why we dedicated our calendar to the African World is on Fire. And all throughout this year, 2022, at times with the help of invited guests, our focus will be on the 2022 theme of our calendar, the African World is on Fire, highlighting the current reality of many places throughout the African world, from Libya to Ethiopia to Mali like today, from the Congo to Azania, from Haiti to Brazil, and to the United States. So we hope you join us next month when we will discuss the current reality of Mozambique, another hotspot. Meanwhile, visit our website, PanAfricanRevolutionarySocialistParty.org. Email us at panafricanrsp@gmail.com. Like us on soundcloud.com. Visit us on YouTube. And please leave comments on our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/PanAfricanSocialist/. So
remember, organization is the key. Join us, the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party, or some other revolutionary Pan-African socialist organization. A union of African socialist states is on the horizon.
Okay. Yeah. Go, Rio. Let me hear you say, go, Rio. Let me paint a little picture. Come on, let me take you to a river, Niger. Soft G like Jay in pajama. Below the Sahel, we are in the savannah. Okay, this is where we start with the blacksmith and iron smelting. People caught the knot, not spear chuckers, nope. They had dagger plows and swords, plus efficient tools let the surplus grain stored. Less time farming, more time to make. Weaving sculptures that they can trade. Up and down the Niger is like an interstate, so they join villages to protect themselves from raids. Squad up, raiders don't want drama. This unity eventually led to the kingdom Ghana, who controls the trade of gold from the mines of Wagara with the meat preserving salt from the Sahara top to Gaza. Kings regulated trade of gold by owning all the harder than the grounded gold dust, which was used like the dollar. Soldiers hired to protect inside and to expand the border. Governors ran the city, monarchs hired scholars to collect a tax on every single thing in kingdom barter. Court was held every day in cases heard. Maintain the order, organized kingdom of officials, traders, golden warriors. Does it sound like the Africa you heard of? Medieval West Africa, Ghana, Mali, song. How the truth was coming at you, everything you thought is wrong, right? All you heard was dirt, poor people in huts. They built castles and had more gold than King Tut. Medieval West Africa, Ghana, Mali, song. How the truth was coming at you, everything you thought is wrong, right? All you heard was slaves and doing voodoo. They built colleges and libraries in Timbuktu. Okay, Let's talk about Mali. 1240 Kumbi was taken by the Mali, who controls the trade of gold. Ghana's rule is declining thanks to Umayyad. Mali's religion, Islamic. Mali's famous king, Mansa Musa, made sure every soul in his land stayed true to the teachings of the prophet. So Islamic knowledge was required and taught to all people by tutors. Mansa Musa so devout, he took the Hajj, but not alone. He brought along a caravan of servants, camels. That's not all. He got to Egypt with his crew. July 1324, he stole the show. He had in tow 30,000 pounds of gold. People were in awe. They saw this regal man as black as coal. Jaws dropped to the floor and Mansa Musa start to throw gold to the people. Didn't make it rain, he made it snow. Did you know about this dope Mali king on his throne? Medieval West Africa, Ghana Mali song. How the truth was coming at you. Everything you thought was wrong, right? All you heard was dirt, poor people in huts. They built castles and had more gold than King Tut. Medieval West Africa, Ghana Mali song. How the truth was coming at you. Everything you thought was wrong, right? All you heard was slaves and doing voodoo. They built colleges and libraries in Timbuktu. Let me teach you something. Our journey brings us to the song, huh? Yeah. I know you learned a lot from the song, right? If you like learning, let's roll like parkour to Timbuktu's University of Songcore. Hey, what you need to learn about surgery or disease? How about math or astronomy? Songhai had the world's largest library. Muslims from overseas travel just to learn from me. Imams which were Muslim teachers. Songhai had Islamic features thanks to trans-Saharan trade, which encouraged Muslim preachers. This religion influences architecture and the law, so they use Sharia in every city had a mosque. You learn Columbus found America by accident on boat. West Africans saw America 200 years before. The history wasn't written down. People take it as a joke, but how can you doubt the spoken words of a griot? Medieval West Africa, Ghana Mali song. How the truth was coming at you. Everything you thought is wrong, right? All you heard was dirt, poor people in huts. They built castles and had more gold than King Tut. Medieval West Africa, Ghana Mali song. How the truth was coming at you. Everything you thought is wrong, right? All you heard was slaves and doing voodoo. They built colleges and libraries in Timbuktu. Africa is more than Ebola. Africa is more than Ebola. Africa is more than Ebola. Look at Timbuktu. Ibn Battuta told ya. Africa is more than slaves. I said Africa much more than slaves. Africa is more than slaves. That's just a small portion of this picture painted in this frame.